Chav Daled, the Sivan Natashin Samech Tes. We're in the Hemshik Samech Tes from the Rebbe Rashab on Ahmed Lamed Tes.
So we saw the union of the Neshomes, that they were a mile mea pargoid. They were a mile from the parsa between Keser Leachilas or Claudius between the parsa shel mile mea Achilas Lachilas. And therefore they were Meir Nishmosam, and how they were Lamata. Even at the Makif was Meir. Lamata believed Shashvas. And therefore we saw by Chanoich that Afupi was Shisalek Chanoich Esoelikim. He was Botel. Bebitel Gomer to Elikus. Afupi Kain Veyei Neinu. He was literally not there anymore. He disappeared. He was Mishpatel. Altogether, Klapi Maila, Ki Locha, say Elokim, that the Eibishter took him, and he was Misala Legami Beprinas Ayin, and therefore we saw Einei Noi was from Loshen Shkalus in the Ayin. Einei Noi, that became his whole Matthias. And then we saw similar to that in a different, even was Eliyahu Novi, but he was all upon him, all of Begufei, Besairo Hashamayma, where that's in Kitwe, the Bittel, the Guf. Kain Hoya Nishmas Rebbe Chanina ben Deisa, that he would Lafid Sippa in the Talmud Yerushalmi, that he was davening. Shemana Esrei and the Nochash was creeping around his heel with the ganze riches that we saw when we get to that. And just Hargav, it's interesting, it's put down in Torah and the Alter Rebbe. It's mentioned over there in Maima Masuyam that Chanoich hadn't been in the world, and the Yidden wouldn't have been able to be Makabel the Torah, wouldn't have been able to be Matan Torah and the answer. But after that, Chanoich was in the world, that was nice and Efshodius to all the Inyanim which led to Matan Torah. In other words, he was a tremendously high Madrega. Amish would say, Kol Almin, you have to be Nimta B'Teicho Elam Hazeh, that even though he wasn't able to be Mishashi Pelam because he was just too high and too withdrawn, like Amrei, but Davki he was the Nasinas Koyach, Shaliodei Hoya Inyan Matan Torah. As he said to the from the altar. In other words, if not him, then the world wouldn't have been able to continue properly in the way that the Eibishter wanted. Yeah. As Kachas Muvua. By the way, where's he? He's not here again at this Fabro. Rabbi Yochanan, we went on to the Tkufa, the Amoraim, and we saw that the Gemara says about him that Leistein Bar Inesh, that this man is not Beklal Amen, she's not Begeda born of humans. Yeah, but he's a malach, like Rashi says, a ki'im malach. In other words, he was legamri l'mayla mio ilon, and all of that was because we reached the conclusion that the parsa, as far as they were concerned, had been split, the parsa. And the pargoid, as we call it, bein amatzil and ertzolim, that was broken, v'hoya b'china seirei seif amatzil b'teisvus ha'ora. Ba'ainu, shehoya shirish nishmosom, מבחינת ערין סייף הסייף וכל אלמין שלמעלה משטאושלס דאס ספירס דאצילס ובאופן כזה היו למטה. That's the way they were, למטה in their goof, and במקרה they were completely למעלה מישבוס in the Elam, because the Makif, the immediate senior for Makif, can't be Mishashiv bo Elam Hazeh Klau. By the etzem definition, it's moved on me inyan ha-kelim or inyan ha-pnimi, all of the inyan of being down in a Yishashvus Lamata represent. They weren't in a form of Yishashvus Klau Uklal. Therefore we find by Rabbi Yochanan Oid Inyanim Nifloim Benegeh to him that also affected the world in a very close Oifen. And the Alter Rebbe brings it down in Geras HaKodesh that Rabbi Yochanan, the Gemara says, that he was me'ain, he was similar to Adama Rishon. That Kaviyah, there was a certain shufrei, what you might call the beauty or the appearance or the shining appearance of Rabbi Yochanan was similar to that of Adama Rishon. But there are certain other personalities, Derek Yankiv Avinu Va'oid, from that we see that despite the fact that he was a certain personality, Bisman, in a certain time, in his man Masuyom, but he was Be'emes and Neshama Klolis in the highest Daven, that he was Koil and he was shy to all the Neshamas of Yisrael, Be'efen Kloli, and all would be Nimshakli Achrei Zeh. Therefore, they were people that Mitad Echot, they were completely L'mayla Mishtaus, the way they were Lamata, but that had an effect nonetheless on the whole world. That Davki is something which is moved completely from the whole world, is able to actually affect it in a complete and what you might call unlimited oifen, because it's not in that klal that we mentioned the other night. Ein chovush matirasatzmi mibesa asurim. That something's caught in the prison, can't get itself out of the prison, because it's already tofus ba'inyan ha'u. Therefore needs a koyach alien to get it out. The same, the pnimi is not able to be unlimitedly mashpia into the world because it's already nimshach, or even shalak bola into kelim. Or something which is b'chinas makiv, or it's able to have an unlimited ashpoya, and therefore we see that Rabbi Yochanan, he was mi'ain Adam Arishan with the ganze implication, what the Alter brings it down over there in Tanya. Edifa, it says the Rebbe, they were lamata, but even Shogilia, Saiva, Vaina Shaloi Nitamtsemu, Lies Pepinas, Oiresbe, Kalim. They did not come in a form as normally the Nishamas do, that they go through certain Staufshalas, lamata, and they enter the goof in a even from Oires Betoich, Oyer Betoich Kli. Over there Nishama was kilu Maya in them, in a very high and undefinable, even that the makif was mamish meir, even that it was nimtza begufam, or b'ibara it was a makif immediate, it wasn't by his yashvas, it couldn't possibly really settle in the oilam. And that's a tremendous chiddush as we're about to see. Okamoisha hoyu lamata hoyu gilui. Hoyu gilui prinas erein seif haseivev beli shum tim to. In other words, there was mamish oira seivev lamata, and that's almost like an impossibility. It's only mitzad the very koyach ha'atzmos that he could keep such a thing even in a time that they were lamata, and even in the way that they were nimta lamata. The ein seif ha'atzmos was able to keep the gufam, or even that wasn't in our even Ishashva's cloud.
What does that mean? I thought part of the definition of soiviv was that it couldn't be giloy because it's not makabel to it. It can't be makabel.
That's what I was saying. That's what I just pointed out. That's what I was medactic to say. That's what we have to say. It was a koyach ha'atzmas. The mamish the koyach ha'atzmas, he was able to be miyachad them. And the koyach ha'mafli l'asais, the koyach ha'bilti mukba klal, he can be miyachad gam makif v'gam pnimi v'yachad. You follow? That was an akuda. In other words, where you got a koyach l'mayla mishneihem, then you can be miyachad two inyonim, which normally, as you might call it, can't be mishachid, one with the other. But if you have a koyach l'mayla mishneihem, then you can. That's also in Tanya in the Geras HaKodesh, in chapter 12, in the Geras HaKodesh, the Alter Rebbe's Mazba over there, the way you have two inyonim like Chesed and Gvura, but you have the Oyer Ein Seif, which is Meir, Lamayla Mishnayim, then you get Tiferet, that it causes a beetle in the both of them, and then they're able to unite, when there's a gilui of the Atzma Saint say.
The Hachila, how could a neshama which is so high come into a body which is such a...
Oh, that's what he was asking.
It doesn't... I know, but it's even a stronger point. It just doesn't...
Shalom?
It's a stronger point. That like Hachila,
swallow?
Stronger.
Stronger. Yeah, how can it be in a guf gashmi?
Yeah, like Hachila.
Yeah, okay, so I have another shala for you. How can a chila come mimal mamish? So you're not Rabbi Chanina B'Doisa. Yeah, you're just ordinary kibbuin, b'machila sakovit. You're ordinary Levi Joseph. Right? You're not Rabbi Chanina B'Doisa. So how does your neshama get under your guf? I mean, the neshama is chila kam mimal b'toy pnim yusay. It's mamish chila kam mimal. The altar is in Tanya. It's got a nitzu tzelakus mamish. Yeah. So the rest of it ain't nothing. Is a pnimi and a matumtum over deep inside. There's also an here's so that's what we say every day. I mean, once again, b'mechil sakove, you probably say it several times a day, and that is ashayotza. That's why I say b'mechil sakove. I mean, to say ashayotza is a kovet. That's a great thing. So we say at the end of ashayotza, v'buchato Hashem, b'roifei kol basar, u'maflila say. So to heal, you heal all the flesh, because chodila, if those things don't get out of the body, then they cause, how do you call it, uncleanness, and eventually you feel toxic effects inside the body, and that's roifei kol basar. Maflila say. Yeah, so what is that? So the great unfortunate over there, the Taz and the Magen Avraham, they bring that, why do we say Maflila? Says, because they able to keep an neshama inside a guf. That can only be the Koyach HaMaflila says. So they state that in the Magen Avraham. He says that the Koyach HaMaflila says means the Koyach HaBilti Gvul of the Eivish altogether. He can keep an neshama in a guf. You follow? So it's the same basic principle that goes even as far as this. That even in a neshama that's begoloi only yelakus. It's not b'derech nira b'klal. It's mamish in kolalmin. In order to keep it in the body, it was koyach hamafli. Or even with the koyach hamafli last days, it was like ayin from rotzev v'shoiv b'hadgosha kokach that it couldn't really be mishyashe. And that's what I pointed out to him. That's basically the necessity for that gila of the Ein Seif mamish. But I feel mitamit is in a state of his yashus, and come over that Yosef and Sivan call in the Indian Rotzev V'Shoiv. On the contrary, it's a much greater Rotzev V'Shoiv, much more intense than it is in the opinion. Anyway, I agree that it's a Tava Pele. That's what's written here. Understand that it's a Tava Pele Ma'id, that there was such high neshamas for Lamata. And so the Rebbe says, "V'hainu, shaloi nitzamtzemu liyesh b'chinas eres bekelim." They weren't eres bekelim at all. Or kamosha hoya lamata hoya gilui erein seif b'lishum tzimtzum. So now the Rebbe puts in brackets a whole brief little statement, a whole brief like essay that we have all over to the other page almost. What's this all in of the relationship between Oyer Machiv and Oyer Pnimi? So that's what he, Dahine Hoer Pnimi, Dahainu B'chinas Mamalu Kolam, not Sevu Kolam, but Mamalu Kolam, in other words, the Oer Tzmeya in the Kelim, and the Shaya to the Kelim, Harishor Shoy, Gam Kelim B'chinas Sevu Kolam. Where does it come from? It comes from the Sevu Kolam. In other words, the Eivish, first of all, Meya Oer Kloli Makifi, what you might call an Oer Atzmi. Then from that is Meya, the inner of the Pnimi B'derech HaOra. But he says, however, that ha'ora, which is meir from the Ur HaSeiva to become Meir Mamari, Rak Shazohu Alidei Tzimtzum Davke Keneda. Ukamation is boiling yield. Like we saw it from Chochmah Da'atik, in order to get down into Chochmah Da'atzilus, which is already Ur Pnimi. That's what he said. It was even for Ur Makif and Ur Pnimi. Then you had to have a Tzimtzum. And in that Tzimtzum Gufo, you had to add also the Inyan of Parsa. That even though the Inyan from Parsa and Tzimtzum are two different Inyanim, but we see that without the Tzimtzum, the Parsa wouldn't have had any effect. And without the Parsa, the Tzimtzum also wouldn't have been sufficient. But however we see it, still Tzimtzum, and the Parsa is also, generally speaking, a form of a Tzimtzum. How can we get from Seiviv to Mamali? First of all, through the concept of Ha'ora Bilvad, then in that itself, Ayin from Tzimtzum. And that's what the Rebbe says, that it's Meir from the Ur HaSeiviv, Alidei Tzimtzum Davke, okay, motion is burly, he does as well. No, motion is burly yield, like we had earlier. Omnom, beginas Gilui Ur HaSeiviv Kol Almin, aber Mamish Gilui of the Ur HaSeiviv without undergoing Tzimtzum, Yesh B'zeh Gam Kein Chiluk Ima Regez, Im Shemitztamtzem Lohoir B'Hapnimi, Dimi Yesh Zeh Gilui Ur HaMakim. So the Rebbe said there's one way that we can talk about the Gilui of the Ur HaSeiviv, that he's Meir in the Pnimi, and it's a form of Tzimtzum, but it's not the form of Tzimtzum that we spoke about before. It's not the Emerson concept of Tzimtzum. And so therefore he now writes a brackets within the brackets. Im shemitzamtzim lohir be'apnimi, the imi yoish zeu gili oimach. It's not Tzimtzum like we just saw, the gili of the pnimi from the oimach. That's mamish Tzimtzum. This is gili of the pnimi. Yeah, veloi is a kemoisha nimtzo b'finas machiv behelem be'apnim. But he said it's not either the idea of the pnimi being found inside behelem inside the pnimi, or kemoi inyan hakos machiv pnimi. Shali deizeh nase hisavas hakelim. Kemoi, for example, the smiting or the beating of the machiv in the pnimi, well, that leads to the inyan of the hisavas hakelim. What we mentioned that briefly before in the Maimah, right at the beginning of the Maimah of Sukkot. He said that's mamish behelem. So says the Rebbe, when I say there's a gilui of the makif in the pnimi, I don't mean that, because that's a presence of the makif in the pnimi, but it's not bederach gilui, nor bederach helem. And here we're talking about helem. I'm sorry, not about gilui. It's not the union of the Tzimtzum to become a pnimi. It's the machiv. But he's meir, but even kozeh, that he's meir in the pnimi, but not b'derech helem. And therefore he's called gilui. So once again, that's going to ask the shari, how can you have that? How can you have the machiv being meir inside the pnimi? The two opposite, one's going to be mevatel the adya. However, we'll see about that in a second. And then he puts in after the brackets, Mikol Mokim hu mitzumtzam b'Ur Pnimi. It is mitzumtzam in the Ur Pnimi, but not in a way that it's emes tzimtzum, like we saw that the Ur Pnimi comes from the Ur. But the Ur Makiv is mitzamtzim himself in a certain way that he enters the Ur Pnimi, but he's still gilui ha'Ur Makiv. So, what does he mean with this whole thing? We need to explain a little. Particularly, we've come up here with the different relations of the Ur Machiv to the Ur Pnimi. We need to explain a little what's this idea of Hakos Ur Machiv Pnimi in order to give rise to the Kelim. We already had that earlier. And it was just also mentioned, Kilo almost going by the way, but here, since the Rebbe mentions it again, it's obviously important that we understand some meaning here. And here he adds a little bit of extra biur by saying that hakor of the makiv in the pnimi is, however, not gilui or makiv. In the pnimi, it's only a presence or a hidden effect. Poel alidei zeh, but it's a hidden effect inside the pnimi. So the emes is that this whole Indian, there are different expressions when I get to how the Kalim come through different collisions almost. That there's a collision of the Chayzer with the Yoshua, and then we say that certain Nitzitzes are Neufel, and also that gives rise to the Kalim. And that's at the beginning of Ayin Beis. There's a whole piece about that. And here, however, the Rebbe uses the expression HaKoz, Pnimi, HaKoz, Pnimi. So I mean, it's obviously not the same language, because if he wanted to say, like the collision of the Yoshim with the Chayzer, then he would have said it. What does he mean is by this concept of the hitting, as it were, of the Pnimi inside the Makif inside the Pnimi. So the emes is that there's a biur on that inyan in the famous Hemshech of Shvuah Samech Tes. It's one of the famous Hemshechim of the Rebbe Rashab. Very difficult, very challenging. Right near the end of that Hemshech, right about on the second or third last daf of that old Hemshech of Shvuah Samech Tes, over there the Rebbe explains this concept in much more detail than what he mentions here. And what he comes up with over there is that the inyan of a kli, compared to oya, compared to what we understand, the gilu of Elokus, mi'amoya, which is oya, and ha'ora, a kli is a matzias. A kli already means a specific entity. But maybe how can a kli come about from the pshitas of the Ein Sof? So one of the things we say is that Ein Nochanam, it comes out of the Tzimtzum. If the Tzimtzum originally hadn't occurred, then you wouldn't have been able to have Kelim Begoloi at all. Emes, V'noche, Zeh Over Filadio, which remains over after the Tzimtzum, Horishoin, is still a Ein Sof, had it called Poshut, and the other Inyonim. It's just that it's already shaykh now to ultimately to be Mitzumtzum, in a way that it'll come into the Kelim. So therefore said the Rebbe, how can you get a inyan of a kli, mamish a yesh, in a way where you're talking about gilui ein sof, gilui pshitas and bligvul of the ein sof. So he said we have to say that that's in the koyach of the ein sof atzmai. That's gufa only in the koyach of the ein sof. And that's what's written over there in the famous Igeras HaKodesh, that Hu Levadei B'koichei V'yicheltei Lahavis Es Yesh Ma'ayin V'efes HaMuchlat, that it's only the power of the atzmus of the Eibishter to bring about Yesh Mi'ayin. And remember the Keri being it as in Yesh Mi'ayin, we have to say that that's in the koyach of the Ein Sof man. And that's the koyach HaSeiv Kol, the koyach HaSeiv Kol Almin. Because the Seiv Kolamin be'emes musik shaloi is that gilui of the Ein Sof. That's what he says in the famous Igeras HaKodesh over there, the Alter Rebbe, that it's mishkale in the oya, or that koyach, or havis, is mishkale in the oya, meaning the oya Seiv Kol. So then over there, the Rebbe Rashab, over in that famous Hemshech, Samech Tes, he writes the most mind-boggling thing. That's really a fascinating inyan. And he says, but if you were to just have Gilui Yesh Mi'ayin purely alidei Seiv Kalalmin, the Seiv Kalalmin would just go boom and create a Yesh Mi'ayin, he said, Bilti of Shoriyas. He says, not child such a thing. So then immediately puts in brackets, how dare I say a thing like that? I mean, you can tell the Eibishter, he can do whatever he wants. We're talking about Atzmusay and Gili Atzmusay. He can just do whatever he wants. So this is we've mentioned it in the Shurim on different occasions. Here he goes over there, but there he mentions it in a very special way. The Rebbe Melech Moshe mentions it several times in his Maimorim. Is that's a cloud that Ein Hanamim, it's an omnipotence. Anything could have been. Days he could have just been Atzmus and he could have just produced ich weiß nicht, Quachabat. Otherwise he could have just produced anything. He could have produced a tree in Quachabat. Mamish me Atzmus. However, David didn't want that. He wanted that somehow or another every union should have a certain explication, it should have a certain explanation. It should be miskabel eventually in the mind of the Adam. In the highest madrigas, the Eivta had in mind the Adam that he wanted that, and however he was going to do things would eventually somehow or another, because the Adam is the, whether you want it or not, the Adam is the center of the creation. And you are the center of creation. You are the center of the creation. I mean, I'm not excluding everybody else. But you live. You follow? The Alter Rebbe said in Perek Nun Aleph, the famous Perek Mem Aleph, the famous Perek Mem Aleph. The Alter Rebbe said, all the eight other Satzman HaKlav, that the Rebbe made everything. Yeah, Bishvili Nivra, in my pathway, everything was created. Bishvili Nivra. Yeah. The Rebbe created the world for every individual. I mean, it's amazing how the Hashgacha Pratis works. I was talking with a young man this morning, Amish Chizda Chabadske, a very geschmack young man, and I happened to mention that, you got all these people, they talk about the Gedolim, they say the Gedolim say this, the Gedolim don't say that, this one doesn't say, and that somebody was complaining that he'd been by a Mishnah family, and he told them he was a Chabadnik, and they all said, well, all the Gedolim say that it's forbidden to say that the Rebbe is Mashiach, or it's forbidden to talk about Mashiach, or all sorts of horrific in your name that are said in the name of these Gedolim. So, it's very hard to say to a person, listen here, just don't listen to these Gedolim. What are you going to say? Very, very difficult. So he says, what he says when he hears that, he just says, look, he said, Rabbi lo diper im HaGedolim. Rabbi diper itcha. He said, Rabbi medaber lekol echad ve'echad. אומר אתה רוצה לקחת את הגודל שלך ותגיד לו, תשב בחדר שלך ותחשוב שאין אף אחד, ולא אתה גודל הדור, לא שום דבר, אתה יחיד, ותשמע רגע שהרבי מדבר איתך, תשמע מה הוא אומר. אבל כל אחד ישכח מכל העניין ויראה שהקדוש ברוך הוא מדבר עם כל אחד. יפה, לא? I was quite taken by that. It seemed to me to be a very interesting thing. Because the Rebbe talks to each and every individual person. He's not talking to not big ones and not small ones and not middle ones, not Beinunim, not Tzaddik. Yeah, the Rebbe is talking directly to each and every individual, and he's saying, listen here, listen to me, mitzad your nefesh elokis, for a moment, what I'm saying. Not bad, eh? So that's what it means, that the Rebbe is talking to you. And the Rebbe is talking to you, the Eivish is talking to you. Yeah, Bishvili Nivaho Eilo. It was all for me. As a matter, he said that the Eivish means that so seriously that he didn't make the world the way he could have. He could have done anything, Eivish. He made it in such a way that ultimately, Yisrael Higbi, sitting over there at the table, sometimes he claps a little drum and everything in the middle of the Hasidah, that the Eivishter wanted that he should understand the Bria, and he should understand the way Elokus relates to the Bria. And you see, I'm sorry I've disturbed your sleep tonight. You're going to go home and say, Kafal, Tata. And I'll say the next morning, where's the list of the people who were in Siddur? So Hibbi gives me the list. Hibbi couldn't make it this morning. He didn't sleep the whole night. So, I'm damaging my own strategy. But however, that's a Matziyah. Now, Mamela says the Rebbe Rashab over there, a most amazing thing. The Rebbe Rashab says that Hanami, the Eibishter can't make a Nivra without both Pnimi and Makiv. And he wants that the Makiv should function through the Pnimi, because the Pnimi is already somehow or another related to you. And Mamela, you can see how that made you. It makes sense to you, and it's Mishkabel Gadah. שזה יש לזה שייכוס ופנימיוס וסלבשוס בכל ואילך. Once again, the same old Shiloh view does. Of so-called it's the air I say we call Almin. It's a Koyach Atzmas. How's it get to the Pnimi? So it comes up to it's within the H Chaim from the Arizal. The Arizal comes up with an amazing idea, and he says, the Ur Pnimi is there, but it's Behelem, and the Ur Pnimi, like it takes a stick, and it pushes the Machif takes like a stick and it bangs the Ur Pnimi and tells it what to do, and it says, listen here, Pnimi, you can't do this on your own, but I want you to make a yesh. And the Pnimi says, I should make a yesh. I'm only an Pnimi. I'm only Mugbal, I'm Gilel Akus, but I'm only Mugbal. So the Makif says to me, let's do what we want. We want a Gilel Mugbal, that it should be able to be part of the Keli, because the Keli's going to be Mugbal. But you got to be a yesh. So the Pnimi says, me a yesh? No way. So the Makif says, he gives him a bang, and that distant sort of effect on the part of the Makif, the Pnimi finds himself that he's already a yes. A pilly place for the man, but does state, Zemashkatu. I mean, I may be saying it in a slightly homely fashion, but that's what's written. It does state in the Kisvei Arizal, and that's what's written over there in V'yaisis in Samech. Amamela says the Rebbe, that's another Inyan. That's not Gilui Pnimi b'toch HaMakif, Gilui Makif b'toch Pnimi. This is Hakoah, and he says Hakoah Alidei over there. He's Madgi said that Hakoah is me Rochi. In other words, it's like you prod somebody. You don't actually walk up to him and sort of say, listen here, would you do this for me? Give him a nice little pat on the back, but you sort of prod him at a distance. You're making moves where what's called in Lashon Kodesh a hedef. You sort of create a movement, and that movement makes him jump in a way that he wouldn't normally have been able to, or even maybe have been wanting to. And the fact does the Nakuda of HaKosef. So the Rebbe said that's not our Inyan here. We're talking about Gilui of the Ur Makif, and there sometimes is a Gilui of an Ur Makif in the Ur Pnimi, and he said that's in these Neshomas that actually reveals themselves, and then it's a Tzimtzum, but it's not a Tzimtzum which is Malim, the majesty of the Ur Makif. The majesty of the Ur Makif remains. So we could say that the Kavanah, that Tzimtzum is what we call on certain occasions here in these classes, that's a Tzimtzum Ha'atzmas. In other words, it's mitzantzim in a way that remains what it is, but it just withdraws itself in like one of those things that goes in and out. What do you call it?
Accordion.
Accordion. It's like an accordion that it just stretches itself into that inyan in order to retain what might be called the shleimus of the effect. Adafa, says the Rebbe, well, that's not that inyan that we're talking about, because we're talking about Gilui. And that whole inyan is not Gilui, it's presence. And it's a helem of the Makif inside the Pnimi. And he says, Alidei zeh, zehu helem. Helem. So I saw the necessity here that we couldn't really avoid. The first time we mentioned it, I wasn't anxious to get too involved in the whole inyan. I think it's only proper here that we go into it in more detail. And over there, Derech Agav, I only remembered after one of the shuddin we gave in it, and then I looked it up the other night, and there's a very interesting bio also on this idea, is avus ha'oyer. We had this concept here, this avus ha'oyer, also it's got to do with the keli. It's also shayat to the keli. So we'll talk about that on another occasion, because we've already dealt with that. But there's another sort of a macho over there that the Rebbe Rashab brings for that concept. But in order not to give you too much material that will, when you come to your Chazar and say, wait a minute, where was he going? I can't quite figure, so we'll stick to the text. And then on another occasion, it's pretty clear that not far along the way here, we're going to come very close to Isavas anyway. So then we'll mention it again. And then he says, Mikol Mokim, even though it's not Helem Mamish, it's a form of a Tzimtzum, but it's also Gilui of the Makif in the Pnim. Okamei Nishmas Rabba Barnach Meini. Here's another Neshama, and this is the Neshama of Rabba Barnach Meini. Now Rabba Barnach Meini means Rabbo. That Stam Rabbo B'Kol HaShas is Rabba Barnach Meini, and he was the Rebbe of Abaye Verova. He was the Rebbe, and the Alter Rebbe, right at the beginning of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe brings who was it that said Lo Yishovek Ma Chaya V'Kol Be'elia, at the beginning, when he says that Kegon Ano Beinonim, or Kegon Ano Beinoni, in the Gemara, it shouldn't be Lashon Rabbim actually. Kegon Ano Beinonim that was either Rava said or Rabba said it, because there's two Gil choice in the Gemara, and the Alter Rebbe brings Tavki Rabba. The Alter Rebbe brings it was Rabba Bar Nachmani. He was the one who said that even despite all his tremendous smiles, he called himself a Beinoni. Or the Maskana is that he was a Tzadikom, Belishim, Belishim Sofik. So the Rebbe said, his Neshama, Rabba Bar Nachmani. The Isa Belakut Tera, Diva Maschil, in Pasha Tazriya. Very famous Maima, Komiflage, Mesivta Derakia, it's called. Just by Derakitza, the Maimon referred to it as Komiflage Bederach Kitza. It's Komiflage, they give it that name. But really it's a quote from the Gemara. Komiflage, or Komiflage, Mesivta Derakia, in the Harikot, in the Yeshiva, up in Gan Eden, the Yeshiva Shalmaila. What was the machlekes they had up there? You know the whole thing. But he's already a little harder inside the Gemara, that there was where the Indian of Bahiras and Seyal Avon is where the Seyal Avon, or the Shkoidim La Bahiras, I think it is that where the white hair comes before the Bahiras. So that's not the usual way. Usually the way there's a Bahiras, like a red appearing on the skin, and then there's the Seyal Avon grows in it. What about the other way around? So the Gemara says it's a Sophic. That's not what's Mavur in the Torah. It's a Sophic. So there's a whole big difference of opinion in the Masivta Rakia. But those are the Neshamas, how they are already in Gan Eden learning Torah. They come to the conclusion that it was Tommy, that it is Tommy, such a Sophic. Why? Because they say it's a Sveika Deraisa, and a Sveika Deraisa L'Chumra. So they ask Kutsha Bricho. All of a sudden, Kutsha Bricho occurs on the scene, and that's the Eivish himself. And the Eivish says, no, it's Tahor. The Eivish says it's Tahor. Even though it's a Sophic, it's a Sophic in Inyoni, L'Raisa, it's Tahor. So everybody thinks that the Eivish said that because he's the Eivish, and he has Rahmanas of everything. The Eivish says, no. Had he could Kodesh Baruch Chas al Mamoinum Shel Yisrael. He doesn't want to make things Tommy. It might cost somebody something. And therefore the Eivish says Tahor. So they say, well, there's a difference of opinion between the yeshiva and the how do you call it, the Ein Seif Rosh Yeshiva, of the whole Masivta Derakia. So then they said, we'll have to call Rabba Bar Nachmani, which means Rabba Bar Nachmani went up into heaven, and the mashmash of the Gemara is that he never came back down. That was the end of it.
Don't say Torah Loiva Shemayim.
Yeah, Torah Loiva Shemayim. He. That's what I invited Rabba Bar Nachmani. But they already brought him up into heaven. That's the whole thing. So they say that Man Nochach. They said, who is here? Is he here? And I said, yeah, Rabba Bar Nachmani is Nochach. He's here. Okay, what do you say? So Rabba Bar Nachmani says, Ani Yochid. I'm a Yochid be'negoyim u'ba'oiloi. So oil is all very, very complex. Inyonim and Tumah V'Tara, and he said, I am the only one in this generation when it comes to these Inyonim. Yochid. The Alter Rebbe tells us that Pnimius wasn't mean Yochid. There was a Gilui of Nishmasi from the Inyan from Yochid, a whole amazing Inyan. He said, Rabbi Nachman, he says that it's Toya. And therefore it's mashmin in the Gemara that Yotza Nishmasi B'Toya, that when he went up, that was what he was saying. He was saying Toya. We see that Rabbi Bar Nachmani also had an opinion, and he paskined in such a way that everybody was makabel. Yeah, even Kuchariga was makabel because he said also it's tahor. Yeah, so we see this amazing Indian of the neshama of Rabbi Banach Meini. So we haven't finished yet. So he says that shehoyo mibchinas ha'oyer machif hazoyreach ve'hoyer pnimi. Now here's a slightly different lashon, and that lashon occurs over there in the Maimah in Likutei Torah. In Likutei Torah, the Alter Rebbe uses that expression that he's a machif hazoyreach ve'hoyer pnimi, and the word zoyreach means to shine forth. When the sun comes up in the morning, that's called the zricha. In other words, the shining forth of the sun. So in the same way, the oyer makiv is zoreach in the neshama of Rabbi Banach Meini. Now, if I say zoreach, now zoreach means to appear in its majesty. When the sun is zoreach, the sun comes up and everybody sees the sun, and the sun appears in his full, what you might call, teika. In other words, he shines for what he is. So that tends to indicate a very noticeable and effective presence of the Makiv in the Panim. Not like we saw the Hakor of the Makiv. That's another Indian altogether, and that's Behelim Godel. Over here, he's Zoreach, Mami shining in, well, that would indicate a presence of the Makiv inside the Panim in a way that he is noticeable and having a visible, what you might call, Gilui Dika effect. And therefore, says the Rebbe, even though there was a makiv in the Panimim, Mikol Mokim Hoya B'Pchinas Ish Yashvus La Mata. He was here, B'Yashvus. Rabbi Banach Meini was here. And therefore, it's put down that Teirosai Ummah, no say that he was mamish the whole time learning. And like the Gemara tells over there was a whole business that in order to take him out of the world, the Baldo had to play whole tricks and all sorts of inyonim, because Lei Posik Pumei Meh. Yeah, Megillah, so he never stopped learning. Well, that tends to indicate a inyan of his yashvus in the state of being lamata. B'hoya meir boy gilui ha'oyer makiv. Begolui the oyer makiv was meir in him. Rak mipnei shehoya alidei oyer pnimi hoya b'pchinas yashvus. We just said that when the oyer makiv is meir in the nesham, in the guf person, he's not in his yashvus at all. So here the Rebbe says no, he is b'yashvus. Why? Because it was meir the oyer makiv alidei the oyer pnimi. As it were, there's a union between the neshama, how he's become oyer pnimi, and the union of the oyer makiv, and one is meir in the other, then there's a yashvus.
Is this meaning of Shem Havayim Shem Elokim?
Maybe we could say, yeah, it could be that it has a certain shaykhus. It says that the Indian is that the emes makiv is l'mayla mi Shem Havaya stam. Elim kein nadaber Shem Havaya delayela and so on. But there could be one could maybe find a certain shaykhus. Yeah. However, b'chinas yashvus. Avo is kasher meir ha'oyer makiv shelo yalidei pnimi. Or when the oyer makiv is meir not through the oyer pnimi, shezeu gilui b'chinas ha'makiv mamish, ein lehem yashvus klal lamata. Yeah, and then they don't have any yashvus like Chanoich, or like Eliyahu Hanavi v'chulu. So says the Rebbe, what's the difference? What is the difference in the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Are these two different types of very high? Now, I mean, Rabbi Banach Meini was obviously very high. We're going to see in a minute, he was manish on the same madrega as Moshe Rabbeinu. The Alter Rebbe brings in the Maimah over there, Behemsha, just near the end, the Alter Rebbe brings that Rabbi Banach Meini was a nitzitz Moshe Rabbeinu mamish. They bring it, yeah. So it's a very common thing in the early teachers of Chassidus that they teach us that there's certain neshamas that they're mamish Moshe Rabbeinu in their generation, and we even find in the Shas in Gemara itself. Sometimes we find that one Amoira will refer to another Amoira as Moshe. He will call him Moshe, and not by his name. He'll just say Moshe Shapir Ka'amras, that you said very good. So everybody asks, what's the between Moshe? His name is not Moshe. What's the person? And so they say that because that particular person was a nitzitz in that generation of Moshe Rabbeinu, and therefore his Chaverim knew about that. Sometimes they would call him Moshe, meaning that he was a Gil of Moshe Rabbeinu. Ad Kedeka, yeah, a pellet. I mean, by Sivan it's not a pellet, but I mean, it's a pellet. So therefore he said, V'yesh Leima, da hefresh b'avidosam hu, da neshama shemebchinas ha'er makiv shebe'er pnimi, ikram hu ba'eshek ha'Torah. The Iker Aveda Lamata is in learning and studying the Inim from Torah. Ukemoy Rabba Banach meaning, shalei posik pumei me, gilsa. Uba'eshet Torosam meir bohem gili elyon yoytza. Since they got in themselves the gili der makiv, then there's meir elyon yoter. Now what does he mean with that? There's meir elyon yoter. So from that we can suggest that that's what the Elder Rebbe said in Tannin right near the end of Perik Daled, that BMS the Torah is a infinite pnimi. The Torah's got both miles in it. It's got the inyan of pnimi because it comes in the Hasoge and it's mishashiv in the Odom b'moyri or b'nishmosei b'eishuhu lamata b'ishashv. However, it's also got the mile of a mitzvah. Yeah, limud HaTorah is a mitzvah. It's got certain miles in the inyan of etzem HaTorah. Those who are zeicha to get to the Rayam HaTorah. Also the inyan of makifim. Yeah, v'chol. And therefore it's like, aber begolui, Torah is Torah, like he brings that pasuk, Torah b'seik meioi. The Torah is inside my, almost as you might say, my intestines. It's in my, my innards, to use an expression, meaning the Torah actually enters pnimi. Therefore, the klal sinif Torah is a pnimi. However, like we pointed out, it's an pnimi, which is obviously a kli and an expression also of our makiv. Of a lot of people learn Torah and they just learn Torah how it is a pnimi. Of the people whose nishmasim anyway has got a zaricha of the makiv inside their pnimi, they're able to learn Torah, and as even that they learn Torah b'er elyon. In other words, they get the union of gilui makiv b'Torah osam. But since the makiv is meir in the neshama, in the pnimi of the neshama, it's b'shashvus, and therefore they learn Torah the whole time and they're in the world and they affect the world. Yeah, but kilu hanhoge al derech haroge, by leadership in a normal way. Yeah, how was by Moshe Rabbeinu? Everything Moshe Rabbeinu was metapel, and he was torah for the sake of everybody v'chulu. And if those are the union of the mila of those that there is a certain ishashvet, and therefore there eishik Torah is in an even from where elyon, but it's ishashvet sokoso. Like we saw Chanoich, or a fellow Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa, Ikram, who be Tfila, Pili Plois van Azach. The Ikar of these people is in davening. Over Dereklau, Bebchinas Haloa, Milmatala, Mila, not in an infinite Shashvas, and everything coming down, no, in an infant, had he heard? Haloa, Milmatala, Mila, they're way up in Olam, so Elyonim, and you can't really pin them down, you don't really know where they are or what they're up to. And therefore, Ike Inin by them is the Inin for Tefillah. And therefore, that'll be very nicha what we find by Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa, that's brought by him right near the end of Perek Daled, a brachas, that it brings there that his Ike Inin was he used to daven for people. He used to come, he didn't used to ask him so much shilas in halacha. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he asked Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa a bracha for his son. He should pray for his son. He was sick. Rabbi Yochanan's ben Zakkai's reverend, she said to him, but you yourself are the leader of the Jewish people. You can pray. Why do you have to go and ask him for? So he said, Ein Hanami. He said, Aval ani kesar lifnei hamelech. He said, V'hu ke'eved lifnei hamelech. In other words, I'm like a minister. If they're able to please with me, if the king's pleased with me at that particular time, I happen to go with the policy of the king at this very moment, then that's good. Or if he said an Eved, he's just completely bottled to the king. He can get out of the king whatever he wants because he just bottled him. But much he is, and he said, Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa Azamin. Therefore, it's written in the Gemara that Enochanami people used to come left, right, and center to Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa and ask him to pray. They used to say, Titpelo b'shul zeh, Titpelo b'shul zeh, Titpelo b'shul zeh. So they used to say that, Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa used to go into a side room and he would come back out and say, my high was visitors. So he says that I've got a way of knowing. He said that if my tefillah is shagula b'fi, if I don't sort of, stutter and jumble, I can't sort of say clearly what I want to say, then that's a sign that this person's going to be healed, everything's going to be fixed up, no problems. But if if I jab and I can't sort of say clearly the words, then that's a sign that it's not good, and we have to pray more, and that time I haven't got rid of the chodila or the kitrug on that particular inyan. So we see from that Rabbi Chanina ben Dois, his whole inyan was dafki davening, and even to the point that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai came to him and asked him to pray for his son, and the Rebbe said, she couldn't figure it was better by him. Du bist doch der Manniger, what are you asking by him? So we see from that the ikar of these neshamas are, are sort of a strange, with their prayers. And the Rabbi Chanina said, if there's tefillah shgura b'fi, he had all sorts of strange signs that he would know, because his whole inyan was kilo aliyah klapei ayla, is when you get up into those areas, you know what's going on, love. L'mayla, you just put in a word and you can say, Hezachayin, Kakve, Beka. The famous Maizmet Reb Mechle Zlatich, given Echa for Zamin Sotev, so similar, slightly bit different. He said, Reb Mechle Zlatich, he was also like that. People used to come and ask him, and he would just say, he would just pray, and they would have Yeshuas and Yonim. So once it came to him, once his son was very sick. His son was very, very seriously ill. And so the Rebbe said to him, you have to pray. You pray for everybody, you have to pray for our son. He said, you're right. All of a sudden the door opens and there comes in a widow or something, an almana, and if she was in a terrible tzara, and she had, if I was for tzara, and all sorts of inyonim. So she says to Reb Mechel, listen, you have to pray. You have to pray for me to save me in this terrible tzara that I'm in. He said, and he said, what's your name? And this, and well, all of a sudden he starts going up into these the whole description that he gets up into Mamish and the Bezdin Shamal and the Masipta, the Rakia, Rabbi Mechler, and he says to them, what's it does? How can you possibly do that to this, Salmona, she's never chazif, Torres, so they said, well, look, there's this and this cheshbon, there's some problem there that Paskin, she's got to have Yisurim. So he says, no, he said, I Paskin, it just has to be bottled all the on. They all said, look at one eye. He said, they go away for a minute, they come back, all the Nishamas, and I say, okay, yeah, you got it. Yeah, so Mechler comes back down, and the mother goes away, and she has a Yeshua. So comes in the river, and she says, what's with our son? You were up there in the early Jerusalem. What do you say about our son? He said, he said, I was so busy with that old man, I forgot all about it. He said, I was so busy with the almana, I forgot all about my son. So the Rebbetzin, she was ready to throw a jug at him. He said, but anyway, it's written that afterwards the son had a refuah shleima. The son of Givon Besser. And we see from that Derek, you almost even what Rabbi Akiva says. We're not allowed to say Zman Lokum would take place of man. It's anyway, it will be in a second, don't worry. So we see from that their inyan was in Alidei Tefillah, but it was in even Aliyah's Milmata Lamayla. Or another possibility, he said another possibility, the difference between the two types of Avedas, that we could say that those Nishamas that they learned Torah the whole time, like Rabbi Nachmani, and there was these Yashvas, They didn't have to give themselves away. They were just paying for Torah. They just, whatever Torah said, they gave it over. But he said, these very high neshamas that they're not b'shashvas, they were able to give themselves away completely. And that'll make very good sense. I just told you about Reb Mechli, when he was in a Indian, he didn't think about himself, Klalu, he didn't even think about his own family. He was completely and utterly given over. So the Rebbe says, because they're so botel mitzad de'er aseivev, that they're hanochas atzmuso. Hanochas atzmuso means putting away their self altogether, laying their whole self on a side. Du bist der Geschliert, hast du wissen, that you have to put yourself completely aside. Ukamoira b'chadnina ben doisa shoya ke'eved lifnei HaMelech. Melech, be beautiful. I don't know what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said to his wife. He said, Ani kesal lifnei HaMelech, avu hu ke'eved lifnei HaMelech. The pshat, he's bottle, he has no metzias whatsoever. So he might say, well, nothing has any metzias. Everything's bought. No, but he gave away his metzias. Doesn't that? Yeah, not just that he knows that he's not a metzias. Avu hu lakach et metzias shelo v'henir et legamrei. Das is from Bilti Yashvas. I think from this, it's not really a seder to live like that. There's certain people, but they manage it. כאבד לפני המלך, וזהו גם כן ההפרש בין הזין רואים לשמיינה נסיכי אדם. That's what I want to get to. But that's the difference between the two famous types of Yidden. There's the 7 shepherds, as it were, or shepherds or carers of the Jewish people, and then there's the 8 princes of man. Shmona Nasichei Adam. So that's brought down in the Gemara Masechet Sukkah, the whole Inyan dot, the whole it's mentioned in the pasuk in the Nevi'im, and so we'll go into that and more in the future in developing episodes or Rosh Rabbim. B'chol ha'inyanim. Over, it's very amazing that Chanoich and Radikolim Eliyahu are members of this amazing what you call club of being the Shmona Nasichei Adam, and the final one is Moshe, and the Rebbe is going to mention him. And the Rebbe is going to mention him, and he's going to give a whole beer what Moshe has got to do with the Shmona Nasichei Adam, with the whole Inyan. We're going to see that Moshe is going to be the ultimate of all the Inyan. He's going to be Oyer Machif Mamish, but he'll also be B'Yish Yashpeh. And as I was saying, the Oyer Machif would not be B'Yish Yashpeh. He's going to be with all the pomp of the Oyer Machif, up because he's going to be B'Yish Yashpeh, and he'll have all things in about the Oyer Penimim, the Oyer Machif, you name it, he'll have it, and they'll all be together, and they won't be Seis Klal one day again. So if you think carefully and you make a little bit of a fair cheshbon, then you'll be able to work out who that is. Thank you, my gentlemen. Have a good evening.